Shots rang out at a Pennsylvania rally on Saturday as an assassination attempt was made against Trump, sending attendees searching for cover and safety. One man in Pittsylvania County was a vendor at the rally. WDBJ7's Michaela Shelton sat down with him to hear his traumatizing experience.
Look at what happened.
The events that unfolded in Pennsylvania at former President Donald Trump's rally on Saturday still play over in Gary Ellis's head.
We sat there and we, trying to calm the crowd down and get them to slow down so then, people didn't get hurt running out.
Although he lives in Ringgold, Ellis travels out of state to rallies as a vendor to sell his Donald Trump jewelry. But he quickly noticed something was off at the Pennsylvania rally when he says he saw a man walking around with a backpack and a suitcase.
He stood out like a sore thumb. I went up and down trying to find security, and I couldn't find anybody. And then I had people in front, looking at our merchandise and stuff. I had to go tend to them. Then I went back up and down again trying to find still couldn't find security.
He then experienced the unthinkable when he heard the gunshots from his vendor tent.
We all heard sounded like firecrackers, and come to find out it was shooting going on, and people just started rushing out. People, screaming, crying, everything. The president's been shot, and they had no idea what was going on.
Ellis also says he saw fewer security officers at this event compared to the other two he attended this year. He hopes there will be increased security at future rallies.
It just kills me inside just knowing somebody lost their life. I believe in owning the rifles and stuff. I do believe everybody has the right to own and carry, but they got to do something better, not allowing something like this to get into events,
In Pittsylvania County, Michaela Shelton, WDBJ 7.